In early 2025, a single decision made in the heart of Beijing sent shockwaves rippling across the globe, landing with particular force in the American auto industry. What began as a routine government announcement quickly escalated into a crisis that would threaten the very foundation of Detroit's legendary carmakers. China, which dominates the global supply of rare earth minerals, those essential elements used in everything from electric motors to advanced electronics, announced sweeping new export restrictions. These minerals, often overlooked by the public, are the lifeblood of modern manufacturing, and China's grip on their supply is nearly absolute. For industry giants like Ford and General Motors, the news was nothing short of a nightmare. For years, warnings about over-reliance on foreign sources for critical materials had gone unheeded. Now, that vulnerability was exposed for all to see, threatening to bring Detroit's proud assembly lines to a grinding halt. The just-in-time supply chains that once made Detroit a model of efficiency suddenly became its Achilles heel. With rare earth shipments frozen, every link in the chain was strained to the breaking point, and the city's factories faced an uncertain future. The flow of these essential materials was choked off at its source, threatening to halt production lines not just for days, but potentially for months. Workers who once kept the lines moving now stood idle, waiting for news that might never come. Industry experts warned that most American car makers had only 2 to 3 months' worth of rare earths in reserve, barely enough to keep the lights on. As inventories dwindled, the pressure mounted, and executives scrambled to find alternative sources or negotiate with suppliers. Every car that rolled off the line brought the industry one step closer to a standstill. The countdown had begun, and the clock was ticking for Detroit. The situation drew immediate comparisons to the pandemic-era chip shortage, but this time the crisis was no accident. It was a deliberate blockade, a calculated move in a high-stakes global chess game, and the consequences threatened to be far more severe. The livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of American workers and the stability of a cornerstone of the nation's economy were suddenly at risk. Families, communities, and entire cities braced for impact as uncertainty swept through the heartland. As the factory gates closed and boardrooms filled with tension, one thing was clear. The drama was just beginning, and the world was watching to see what Detroit would do next. What are rare earths, and why do they matter so much? Despite the name, these 17 metallic elements aren't rare, but they're tough and costly to process. China dominates not just mining, but the processing of nearly 90% of the world's supply. Rare earths are essential for the powerful magnets in electric vehicle motors and for advanced electronics in all modern cars. They're in everything from speakers and power windows to emissions systems and touchscreens. Without them, the recipe for building a modern vehicle falls apart. There are no easy substitutes. Their unique properties are irreplaceable. Finding alternatives would take years of research and re-engineering. The global auto industry had become dependent on a single source, and now that source was turning off the tap. The impact of China's export restrictions was immediate and severe. As the new rules took effect, American car makers' supply chains began to fracture. Ford was forced to halt production of its Explorer SUV in Chicago for a week due to a shortage of minerals for braking systems. For a factory producing hundreds of vehicles daily, even a short shutdown meant millions in lost revenue. General Motors and Stellantis also faced immense pressure, scrambling for parts and inventory. Production schedules were thrown into chaos, and even repairs became difficult as spare parts ran short. The crisis rippled outward, affecting suppliers, logistics, dealerships, and mechanics nationwide. A policy decision in China was now disrupting the daily lives of millions of Americans. Factory shutdowns aren't just headlines, they're deeply personal for thousands of workers and their families. Each closure ripples through entire communities, affecting not only those on the assembly line but also local businesses, schools, and neighborhoods that rely on the steady hum of industry. When a line goes quiet, skilled workers are sent home, facing lost income and deep anxiety about their future. The uncertainty can be overwhelming, as paychecks stop but bills keep coming. For many, these jobs are more than just employment, they're a source of pride and identity. A modern car factory is designed for constant output. Even a brief halt incurs massive losses and logistical headaches. Every hour of downtime means missed deadlines, disrupted supply chains, and mounting costs that ripple up and down the industry. For a model like the Ford Explorer, a week of lost production means tens of thousands of vehicles not made and hundreds of millions in lost sales. Dealerships run short on inventory, and customers face long waits for new cars. Rare earth shortages are all or nothing. Without these elements, production stops completely. There's no easy workaround. These metals are essential for everything from electric motors to onboard electronics. The crisis spread beyond Detroit. Suzuki in Japan suspended swift production for over 2 weeks, and European car makers like BMW also faced severe disruptions. The shockwaves hit every continent, showing just how interconnected the industry had become. The issue was global, exposing how dependent the world's leading manufacturers had become on a single source. Supply chains stretched across oceans, and a single bottleneck could bring everything to a halt. The lack of rare earths meant cars couldn't be finished, sold, or even repaired. Vehicles sat incomplete, waiting for parts that might not arrive for weeks or months. The vulnerability was now painfully clear. Executives scrambled for solutions, but the scale of the problem was unprecedented. The world's auto industry was at a standstill, forced to confront just how fragile its foundations had become. As factories fell silent, the crisis became a diplomatic flashpoint. The White House faced immense pressure to act, launching high-level negotiations with China. Rare earths became a central bargaining chip in broader trade talks. After tense discussions, a temporary deal was struck. China granted 6-month export licenses to key American suppliers. This offered Detroit a brief reprieve, allowing factories to restart. But the deal was fragile, details were vague, and the underlying dependency remained. The clock was ticking on a new deadline. The auto industry had breathing room, but the challenge of breaking free from China's dominance was more urgent than ever. The crisis was far from over. Ford didn't wait for a diplomatic fix. It launched an aggressive strategy to secure its future. Engineers scrambled to re-engineer parts and reduce reliance on restricted rare earths, a complex and urgent task. Ford accelerated talks with suppliers in Australia, Canada, and the US to diversify its supply chain. In the short term, Ford prioritized its most profitable models, like the F-150, channeling scarce parts where they mattered most. Less profitable vehicles saw production slowed or stopped. The crisis also sparked innovation. Ford ramped up R&D into new motor technologies that use fewer or no rare earths. The 2025 supply shock became a wake-up call, forcing Ford to rethink its approach to technology and manufacturing. The company was determined not to be caught off guard again. For Ford, the crisis was both a threat and an opportunity. General Motors was better prepared thanks to strategic moves made years earlier. GM had already begun building a domestic rare earth supply chain, partnering with MP Materials in California and planning a new magnet factory in Texas. Another partnership with Germany's VAC would bring a magnet plant to South Carolina. These projects weren't yet online, but they offered a credible path to future independence. GM's strategy diversify suppliers and reduce exposure to political risk. In the short term, GM still faced shortages and joined the diplomatic scramble. But its long-term investments reassured investors and the public a more secure future was in the works. The pain was temporary, but the lesson was lasting. This wasn't just Detroit's crisis, the shockwaves hit car factories worldwide. Suzuki in Japan halted swift production for weeks, and German giants like Volkswagen and BMW faced chaos as supply chains unraveled. The European Union, like the US, was forced to confront its strategic dependency on China. The crisis exposed the fragility of globalized, just-in-time manufacturing. For decades, efficiency and low costs drove companies to concentrate sourcing in China, ignoring the risks. The 2025 ban revealed the true cost of that gamble. Now car makers and governments in Europe, Japan, and North America share a common goal: build secure, diverse supply chains. This could spark new alliances and joint investments in mining and processing outside China. The race to secure critical materials is now global. The rare earth crisis of 2025 marked a dramatic turning point for the global auto industry, sending shockwaves through every level of manufacturing and supply. Practically overnight, automakers and suppliers found themselves grappling with shortages, price spikes, and a new sense of vulnerability that few had anticipated. Temporary deals and quick fixes offered only short-term relief. The real challenge was much deeper: building true resilience and long-term security into supply chains that had grown sprawling and fragile over decades of globalization. Companies realized that relying on distant partners and just-in-time logistics was no longer enough. The era of assuming global stability is over. Now, onshoring and friendshoring, bringing production closer to home or to trusted allies, have become the new priorities for automakers and governments alike, reshaping the very geography of manufacturing. Projects like GM's new magnet factories are just the beginning. Across the world, companies are investing billions in new plants, retraining workers, and rethinking how cars are built from the ground up. But this shift will be costly, complex, and slow, requiring patience and vision. For consumers, this transformation may mean higher car prices and longer waits for new models. Yet, in this new era, stability and reliability are now worth the price, as people and businesses alike seek certainty in an unpredictable world. Innovation is more crucial than ever. Researchers and engineers are racing to develop new materials, advanced battery chemistries, and motor designs that don't rely on rare earths, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in electric mobility. The company or country that cracks this code, finding alternatives and securing supply, will gain a massive advantage, shaping the future of transportation and industry for decades to come. This crisis is about far more than just cars. It's about the intersection of technology, geopolitics, and a new industrial age, where energy, environment, and economic power are all tightly linked. The minerals powering our green future, lithium, cobalt, and rare earths, are now tools of strategic power, shaping alliances and rivalries on a global scale. The challenge ahead is clear. Build a future that's advanced, sustainable, and secure, so the wheels of industry keep turning, no matter what obstacles arise. The choices we make today will define the next era of manufacturing and mobility.